What do you mean you forgot again?
I'm sorry.
You said you were just helping with taxes. She'd told me like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. That offhand line, so casual, so calm, stayed with me. Helping with taxes. A neat phrase for an ex who shows up on a Thursday night, brings a bottle of wine, lingers until after midnight, and leaves his scent on the guest towel like he had a right to stay. I nodded then, because I wanted to believe. I wanted to keep things easy. Maybe I was the kind of man who chose trust over confrontation. Maybe I was just tired of the fights. But the truth doesn't wait for comfort to catch up. This wasn't a dramatic reveal. There was no lipstick on a collar, no hidden camera, no explosive scene. It was smaller, receipts folded into drawers like secrets. A late-night gas purchase stamped 12:47 a.m. while she swore she fell asleep in front of Netflix. At first I parked the receipts in the probably nothing drawer inside my head. I told myself not to read betrayal into every silence. I didn't want to be the man who'd let old wounds shape every tiny moment. Still, the receipts kept lining up like punctuation marks in a sentence I didn't want to finish. One evening I glanced at her phone on the counter, no passcode, because she'd always said she had nothing to hide, and saw a missed call from Eli Taxes. I didn't know the name, so I scrolled back through the thread. 7 messages. I'll bring the wine LOL. Where's that blue thing you used to love? That casual language hit like a quiet verdict. I didn't throw the phone, I didn't shout. I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself. That's when the idea of leaving moved from possibility to plan, not because I was furious in the moment, but because my self-respect started whispering. We'd been married long enough to have a history that mattered. We'd held one another through funerals, built Christmas forts, and woven small rituals that felt like home. Leaving would mean dismantling that life. It would mean legal papers, shared memory, and the dull ache of letting the familiar go. But the evidence mattered. If I was going to change course, I wanted it based on truth, not suspicion. When I asked her about Eli, she answered like a practiced actor, smooth, steady. Oh, him? He's an accountant now, just helping me with some forms. Her voice carried the kind of casualness that breeds doubt if you know where to look. That same night I made her tea, we watched a movie. She fell asleep halfway through and I stared at the ceiling, cataloging moments that suddenly felt like holes. Over the next week, the small things multiplied, wine glasses tucked away in the dishwasher, an odd perfume trace by the hallway, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. I came home early one day and found her laughing in the kitchen, a laugh I'd loved, joined by a man I didn't know. He was tall, confident, wearing her apron as though he belonged. I introduced myself. He didn't meet my eyes. She put on a quick explanation, helping with taxes, reheating leftovers, nothing unusual. After he left, I kissed her forehead and went to bed, holding a storm inside. The next day I called in sick and started digging. Not the viral social media kind of digging, quiet, practical work. Bank statements, hotel bookings, a missed credit card she'd forgotten I could see. I printed pages, stacked them, and watched the pile grow into a manila folder heavy enough to hold my questions. Then Marcus from the hotel front desk texted a photo, her and Eli, hands linked in the lobby. The casual comfort in that shot was the final seal. It wasn't fury that woke me then, it was a cold, clear knowing. I didn't do something cinematic. I didn't burst into the hotel or smash a window. Instead I walked through our day like a man testing tiles for cracks. I continued to make coffee, to send banal texts, to tuck normalcy around the edges of a life I knew was unraveling. But inside, I started collecting evidence with a quiet, methodical focus: emails, texts, receipts, because if this was real, I wanted to face it with facts, not fog. One night, while she was in the shower, Eli sent a message: "Miss you already." Thursday again. Same room. I read it until the letters blurred. The water ran and the steam pressed beneath the bathroom door. I could have knocked and pulled the truth into the open. Instead, I sat on the couch and waited. She came out wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, soft and ordinary. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. I patted the spot beside me and watched her settle, feeling like I was observing a stranger under a familiar roof. I cleared my calendar for a week and moved money quietly, canceled joint subscriptions, straightened accounts. I printed everything, not to pounce immediately, but so I wouldn't have to scramble for truth later. It became a ritual, sober, deliberate, a lifeboat being built plank by plank as the ship slowly tilted. I told myself I'd use the folder to decide. Confront, counsel, leave, one of those roads had to be right. The Thursday came. She put on perfume, dressed like someone who wanted to be noticed, then walked out the door with a practiced "I love you." I followed at a distance, not for spectacle but for closure. The hotel entrance swallowed them both. They moved with a familiar ease that made my chest ache in an odd, hollow way. I watched from my car until the lobby doors shut. No dramatic rescue, just a quiet, private witnessing. I drove home and opened the folder. The next morning I made breakfast. When she came down, blonde hair fresh, lip gloss neat, I handed her a photo of them in the lobby printed on glossy paper. The timestamp was circled in red. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice finally betrayed something: shock, then anger, then panic. "It means I know," I said quietly. She asked why I hadn't spoken sooner. "Because I needed to see what she would do, how she would choose." I slid the manila folder across the table. The pages inside were not a weapon, they were a ledger of truth. "I want a divorce," I told her. Silence. Then disbelief. "We can fix this," she begged. "Therapy. Talk. Anything." I'd listened to her promises after crisis before, they rang hollow now. I picked up one suitcase and packed the essentials, not to punish, just to set my life in motion. She pleaded. She tried to shrink the world to the size where apologies fit. I walked out the door. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized, clean, quiet, irreversible. She sent one long, remorseful email saying she'd made a mistake. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd found something more important than settlement or spectacle: my own voice. She had the habit of turning small things into proof of innocence: an easy smile, a soft shrug, a plausible excuse. But what she couldn't explain away was a pattern. The receipts, the late nights, the perfume on the towel, those were the paragraphs in a sentence she'd been writing for months without me. After I left, I learned something about the way people try to retell the same story with different actors. Friends heard fragments, they pieced together versions that suited them. Some thought I'd been invasive, called it spying. Others saw the folder and understood why boundaries felt necessary. Her narrative tried to paint me as the villain who'd invaded privacy. I didn't deny examining messages. When a house creaks, you turn on the lights. The difference was motive. I wasn't hunting to humiliate, I was hunting for the truth so I could make a clean decision. She told mutual friends a softened version: loneliness, confusion, a moment of weakness. maybe it was that. But months of private attention to someone else is not a fluke. It's a choice. After she quit her job and moved back, actions she said she took for us, I met her twice. The first time felt tentative and alive. The second time, in a park, I told her I couldn't trust her. People filmed as she lost control, making a scene full of pleading and anger. She accused me of cruel timing. I answered that sometimes the cruelty was only the necessary truth. She called me cold for planning to hurt her. I told her yes, I'd planned the exit because I'd grown tired of being second-guessed by silence. She followed with a cascade of messages, apologies, confessions, sobbing voicemails. I left most unread. When I responded once with a single laughing emoji, it wasn't flippancy so much as punctuation to a chapter one refused to reopen. She accused me of punishing her when all I'd done was refuse to be what she'd taken for granted. She tried to regain friends, telling them I'd been controlling. Some believed her. Others, who'd seen the folder, knew the quieter truth, a man who'd chosen to collect evidence before deciding his next step. Boundaries became my measure of self-respect. I didn't need a courtroom spectacle, I needed life that matched the person I wanted to be. She wanted to rebuild, but rebuilding requires both people to lift the same beams. She'd already been building a separate structure. When the foundations are split, you can't expect the house to stand. Months later, she pressed at every door, my house, my inbox, my voicemail with wild, pleading confessions. I kept the door closed. It wasn't malice, it was the slow, necessary protection of a life you refuse to gamble again. She said she regretted it. She asked for another chance. I looked at the folder and saw months of choices, not a single misstep. I also saw the quiet man I'd become, one who could step free rather than keep gluing a life that had long since peeled away. People ask whether I regret the way I left, if I miss the ritual of someone who once felt like home. Of course I miss what we were, the small, shared things that built the comfort of us. But missing is not an argument for returning to what hurt you. Sometimes the bravest thing is to leave before you're forced to keep from teaching someone that your heart is an endless supply of second chances. She reached out once more with a long apology and a wish to try again. I did not answer. Not out of hatred, but because I had finally given myself permission to be someone who listens to his own quiet, who chooses clarity over an illusion. I found peace in the silence that followed. It was not revenge. It was the recovery of a life where I didn't have to explain my worth to someone who stopped seeing it. Time passed and the noise faded. Her attempts to reconnect moved from frantic to routine. She posted apologies, she visited old friends, she tried to stitch back a reputation that had frayed. I watched from the edges of my life and learned to let consequences play out. She'd asked him to stop. She quit, moved back, declared contrition. Those acts mattered, but they came after the ease of duplicate affection had already been chosen. I'd wanted presence, not emergency gestures. When she pushed too hard, showing up at my door, shouting, leaving tearful recordings, I held to the boundary I'd set. I wasn't interested in theatrical reconciliation. I wanted evidence of sustained change. She offered speeches and scenes, I asked for steady behavior. That difference turned out to be the line we'd crossed. I won't pretend the ending was clean. It left a residue of loss that's not easily swept. But I also won't romanticize staying for the sake of what we had. We had built something together, she tended another garden while pretending ours would thrive. You can forgive a mistake, you can't unwatch the months someone quietly invested elsewhere while your life continued. If you've been through such betrayal, the lesson is simple: insist on honesty before you invest more of yourself. If you're the one tempted, be adult enough to stop before you fracture someone who trusted you. Quiet deceptions become loud consequences. My folder stayed packed for a while, a ledger of what was real. Eventually I let it go, not because the memories vanished, but because I stopped feeding them. I learned to answer my own quiet voice first. I learned that leaving can be an act of preservation rather than punishment. I learned to find my voice again and, slowly, to listen.